everyone, welcome back to another episode of Intersections, Mission to Innovate. With me in the Spark Studio is Prachi and Kuan and our very special guest, Tony Moraco. This two-part episode covers strategy and innovations. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off to you, Prachi.
Thanks, Gracie. Hey, everyone. As you know, the tagline of our Intersections podcast is Mission to Innovate. And today we are so honored to have a special guest in the studio, Tony Moraco, who's had an illustrious career as an executive leader in the industry, being closest to the missions of national importance and innovating in those spaces. We are so glad to have you. Welcome, Tony.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited.
All right. I'm going to hand it over to you, Kuan, to get us started.
Sounds good. Hey, Tony, it's so exciting to have you in our studio. Thank you again for your time.
Hello, Juan.
Hi. So you started with Autometric. I actually didn't know that until we read your bio, where you were in multiple leadership positions, including Senior Vice President for Corporate Development, and then moved to Boeing, where you led multiple programs in space ground segments, geospatial technology, and homeland security solutions. Then you joined SAIC in 2006 and led the ISR Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance Group, and then the Government Solutions Group before your appointment as CEO in 2013. I didn't realize I started at SAIC before you. That's kind of crazy. So can you talk to us about your early career, starting from a master's degree in geodetic sciences? Can you tell us what that is? Because we didn't know. And then working for companies like Autometric and Boeing. How did that journey shape your next career role at SAIC?
Sure. Well, again, thank you for having me today. We've had a great career, 35 years in national security and federal contracting. But my degree is in civil engineering. So I was interested in mapping and remote sensing from early part. So my master's degree was in photogrammetry, which is around measurements around using remote sensing photography to make maps, basically. So with that, I joined Autometric, which was a small photo interpretation analyst, image analyst type company, did a lot of national intelligence work. So that got me into the intelligence community, the classified arena. My first job was actually doing geopositioning for the Tomahawk cruise missile program for the Navy. So that was a kind of an early 84 kind of job. But with that, the small business as Autometric was about 80 people when I joined it, and grew to about $100 million in revenue when Boeing acquired it in 2000. So that 16 years, I had the opportunity to run portfolios, do technology development, manage contracts, and the last job was kind of a COO type role in business operations to help the company as it was growing. When Boeing acquired us, I got access to a very large business, obviously, Fortune 500, big platform programs, and a whole different business dynamic. But I think the experience I had in those two domains, all around remote sensing, space business, so Boeing got me from the imagery side of what was collected to the actual collection systems, the mission side from launch to satellites, to payloads, ground stations, and the like. So kind of brought it all full circle for me in parallel with the business operations aspect, small business and large business. And when I joined SAIC, my portfolio was still around national security, contract management, program management, technology integration. And then as it evolved, last stints at SAIC before the split was again a CAO type role where I had oversight of some corporate functions at $10 billion enterprise. So the combination of the technology, the national security domain, the business operations, both small and large business, I think all aligned for me to be able to have a successful career around the geospatial tradecraft on one hand, national security interests, and then business operations, where I was able to bring that together for my CEO role from 2013 to 2019 to really have a broad perspective of what we do for our customers, how we do it and run it as a business to create value, and to bring large organizations of people together and align them to a common outcome.
Wow, Tony, that's truly an amazing, purposeful journey and career. When you held these leadership positions, leading both large organizational units and then, of course, CEO of SAIC, I'm curious to learn about your approach to developing the overall vision and organizational strategy. And for example, like when I try to do that for a particular practice area, very simplistically, I think of combining external drivers like the market trends, technology trends, with internal capabilities and then sort of identifying and communicating that North Star, right, for everybody. Of course, doing that for an entire organization is a whole new game. So we would love to hear from you. What were some of the foundational aspects of strategy development for you, and who all did you involve in that process at a high level?
Concepts around any organization, you start kind of, I think, with just an inventory of where are you today, at that moment. Every organization, typically has some history. The startups, have an origin in some fashion, some core vision, discipline, and provide vision of what they want to be when they evolve as a business. So I think a combination of internal perspective on an inventory of capabilities, culture, and legacy of where you've been, and to understand kind of where you might go. To your point, the external perspective of what markets might we want to face as a business? What mission areas are we passionate about that we think that we can make contributions that are aligned to, again, that vision? And if you bring those market aspects together with market studies, consultants, whatever perspective that you can draw in, and take inventory with your current capabilities, you can first align where you can deliver value in the near term, given what you do and who you can do it for. And then second, to develop a longer term vision and strategy of where you want to be 5-10 years out. You can look at what and kind of anticipate what that next generation technology roadmap might look like and how would your business align to it. Because as the business evolves, you have to be able to make decisions fairly quickly, but at the same time, have that destination on horizon or over the horizon even, to kind of guide you, because you have limited resource. We used our executive leadership team, the technology staff, the technical fellows, the business aspects and business development leaders, and our customers, really, to help guide us on laying down a foundation of what we could do as a business at a given time, and what could we look to do, in essence, identify gaps. If we want to be able, you have to operate today. So you deliver capabilities that you have in hand, but you also need to continue to explore gaps and can fill those gaps with new capabilities by hiring new people, partnering differently, so that you can continue to evolve your solution sets and expand your marketplace, so you can create value for your own company and then for the external stakeholders that you have to address.
I loved how you laid out that framework. And what struck me is that, yes, there is almost that analytical rigor involved in just thinking about these different aspects. But you also made the point about what are you passionate about? What markets are you passionate about? And what is like the on the horizon and over the horizon aspects of some of this? And I truly feel that can add that additional, fuel and additional aspect to all of this thinking. So thank you. That was great.
This is very unique for Prachi and I. We feel like we're getting some like CEO mentoring here. It's really cool, for when we become future CEOs or something.
That's right.
So the topic of our podcast, and we've discussed this previously, and you've listened to a few of our episodes, is around innovation and how do we help organizations with thinking about innovation and planning for innovation, defining innovation, because it's a very overused word, right? There's a lot to unpack with that. So we wanted to ask you how you define innovation and the process of innovation, and what is needed for an organization to adapt to external drivers and thrive. For example, right now we're dealing with tech explosion. There's so much technology out there. We have political, civil unrest, post-pandemic dynamics, and the Great Resignation. Can you talk to us about examples of companies that you think have managed this well? Have they done it well? And it can be a product or a services company.
I think in the context of just innovation in general, I think you're looking at the concept around, what is that next generation capability that's going to have a significant impact on some mission area, let's just use mission as a market, a solution, a problem set, requirements that need to get addressed. I think that we spoke a lot of invention versus innovation, integration, and then I've got to talk with others about adoption of really how the concept around things don't operate in a vacuum. So the integration aspect, particularly in this very robust high-tech world that we're in, with everyone having expansive exposure to all kinds of technologies that, 20 years ago, it was more limited to what you could actually explore, right? Going to the library, right? And the discovery was much more challenging then.
Yeah, absolutely.
So discovery now is so much easier, enabled by the technology itself. But I think innovation is around how can we talked about technology transfer as a form of innovation. How can we take something that exists today, because we want to get to market quickly? So invention's helpful in one aspect, and that those obviously create huge breakthroughs, but isn't the only element to get to innovation, right? And in fact, there was an example, Thomas Edison invented the phonograph, right? But as an invention to record sound, with a round cylinder.
Yeah.
But in turn, the innovation from an adoption was the innovation around the record and how you could mass produce records so that it actually could be distributed without breakage, without, for major mass appeal.
So that's interesting. I've never thought of it that way. Like, okay, I like that. I mean, I think I understood it that way, but I never thought of that process that way, that we have the invention and then the innovation is the sort of the other uses of the thing that you just.
Correct. It's enhancing that capability. And so I think, and again, the elements around it are understanding different technologies, the concept around technology transfer. How can I adapt a certain capability that exists, that's proven, right? So I can mitigate my risk and adapt it to a different environment. I think you mentioned companies. I think SpaceX these days, with the advent of commercial space over the last 5 years plus, is a great example. And just think about the technology, the innovation of landing a rocket. So for decades, it was launch and you're sending, assets up into space. But the fact of trying to create a recoverable launch vehicle and actually create innovative technologies in landing gear, control systems that actually allow a rocket to reignite, change its whole direction, and then land back where it started, to me is one of the most fascinating innovations, of late in an industry that is exploding because of, I think, the adaptation of many technologies that are now being applied with a mission and a vision of longer term, deeper space exploration. You have that foundation of a strategy and vision, and then innovators adapting to technologies around things. So we knew how to launch rockets, but wasn't quite sure how to retrieve them.
Right.
And so now we have recoverable launch vehicles that have been used multiple times, combined with small sats and different payload constructs that are really pushing technology, into space from my early career, when it was kind of exquisite capabilities with only assets, on orbit. And now so many companies can actually put things in space and exploit, the space domain, unlike what we were able to do 5-10 years ago.
I love that example. And that was one of the trends that we talked about, Prachi, right, in the January episode on commercialization of space, and how Prachi and I want to be, the next cohort of people that are considered to go somewhere. But yeah, I think
good luck with that. I'm afraid of heights, so I'm not interested in.
So I think, we talk a big game. When it actually happens, we probably will be like, yeah, no, that's okay. But we just want to be asked, because that would be very cool. I do think it's also exciting to see that in the way that the commercial industry has been just pushing the envelope with, the reusable rockets, it's also invigorated NASA. So, we have we have a large account with NASA, and it's been exciting to see sort of all of the ways that we're now trying to relearn, right, from a NASA perspective, what they already figured out, going back to the moon and sort of exercising those muscles a little bit. So that's been cool to see, just the influence of commercial innovation and reinvigorating NASA to do things that they know how to do.
No, certainly, at least for us, there are some newer insights in sort of the framework that you are laying out here again. The relationship between innovation and invention, and then the aspects of integration and technology transfer that you started describing. And I feel like maybe we can pull the thread a little bit further. So you've mentioned that like innovation needs to scale, and in my head, the ultimate impact happens when that scale is attained behind when that technology transfer happens. So, I mean, there is no doubt that there is a huge need for it. And that's where you sort of tie that back to the mission and mission outcomes, right? So can you elaborate further? I mean, what are some additional nuances here, either from a general framework standpoint, or even potentially maybe some interrelationships or barriers that you might see?
Well, I think one key aspect is we talk about this, the commercialization and the adoption of commercial technologies, because I think commercial capabilities are advancing at a much faster pace than traditional, say, government research and development. I mean, they both play a role. But with, I think, again, the advent of so many entrepreneurial efforts that are out there, different funding sources now from an investment perspective that facilitate, entrepreneurs from getting that seed money to actually evolve a problem set into a solution. I think that those parts of the ecosystem work collaboratively to bring resources together to allow those ideas to actually become something that can be prototyped and demonstrated. It is part of that evolution, right? It doesn't happen overnight. I think a big challenge of any kind of innovation is trying to find those early adopters such that you can get to an adoption level that, one, further provides funding and resources, whether it's going to be through people, partners, or dollars, to allow those technologies to advance. I think there's many instances where, absent that, those bright ideas just really don't move forward, and they don't mature enough to actually have an impact. But where there is opportunity to have common investments, partnerships that create channels to deliver the technology through, and early adopters that are willing to take some level of risk to demonstrate and experiment to some degree on a quick turn, I think is what we've seen evolve, whether it be on the software side with Scrums and the kind of rapid development. Prototyping has always been part of our collective business to really try and prove out capabilities. We've seen cases where prototypes became operational, in critical times, during wars and other conflicts. So I think that there's that ecosystem of resourcing, adoption, and alignment that create both end customers and the partners that you need that help facilitate it to maintain momentum. Because I think that you've hit certain thresholds, even businesses do, 5 million, 25, 100 million. There seem to be these thresholds or barriers almost that you need to evolve through and adapt your own business and your own processes to a different kind of level and environment. It's a lot different managing 5 people with a common orientation to 50 to 500 to 5,000 to 50,000. And so the alignment of how you actually run your organization, communicate, which is a huge aspect of communicating internally and externally with enough clarity to get people excited and passionate about your idea, has always been a challenge, right? I really respect the sales folks on those that are really effective at conveying not just the feature, but the benefit of a solution to an end user so that there's a value proposition that is held jointly, is really a fundamental part of moving the technology advances and innovation ultimately to a level of adoption that makes sense. So it's a robust ecosystem, as you guys have collectively described, and it comes in multiple aspects, and you can't just rely on the technology to speak for itself. You have to have those that translate, as well as translators. Tech transfer was a big deal. As you know, Kuan, we've dealt with different defense services. You have to kind of translate an Army solution set to the Navy or to the Air Force. It may be common, but unless you can actually speak in their context of their mission requirements, it's sometimes very difficult to break into. That's why you have experts that understand those missions. And again, that's that context of communicating and have folks, one, understand your technology, innovations you're advancing, but then how do you then shape that conversation and communicate it and tailor it to the different markets that you're facing, because you don't want to be singular. The best tech transfer opportunity is again, one capability that serves multiple markets.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's nirvana relative to the business side where you can exploit your investments.
Well, and I think certainly in the, all the digital transformation type technologies, cloud, AI, IoT, right? Those are technologies that it's sort of independent of mission, right? It transfers to everybody, but that has been challenging where that hasn't taken off to make everyone comfortable that we're not, it's not the Wild West, and that we're not going to break things and put things out there that are not secure. So reflecting back, Tony, in your career, were there innovations or investments that you feel like were a missed opportunity, or that we pursued it and there was sort of a better way we could have done it, or it didn't result in the kind of expected outcome growth that you were anticipating?
Sure. We've had plenty of quote failures that everybody learns from, and I think the prior speakers have talked about it's always a learning process, and whether you succeed or fail, there's success in the learning. There's value in the learning that's part of that. I think in my case, being principally around a services organization delivering technical capability and subject matter expertise, I think the lost opportunity is perhaps the productization of some of the technology that could probably have created significant financial value had the business and the business model and culture of the enterprise made investments aligned to a product model. There's a significant difference going to market as a service capability provider, an integrator of subsystems to get to an outcome, versus a commercial products company, whether it be software licenses or hardware components. I'm on the board of Curtis right now. They're much more of a hardware component and system manufacturer, where at SAIC, we didn't have a robust manufacturing capability. And I think there were technology innovations that we saw with our customers that had our business been able to adapt to a product model, I think we could have actually monetized and developed a much broader portfolio with intellectual property, with licensing capability. But to do that, the culture needs to have, one, the vision and resourcing capabilities to adapt to a mixed model. And I think that's a challenge for certain companies. And I think you see in the market, companies that are traditionally product tend to outsource their services, right? Because they don't want to get into the services game, and services company in turn. So there's a good compatibility between service and product. But I do think that perhaps for us, some lost opportunity was in some, what we felt were integrated technologies into a solution, that solution itself could have been marketed differently as a product. And that maybe could have created more value and then sent resources to further scale the business and address a broader customer set. It's a little bit easier, I think, if in fact you have a product to sell. And one of my earlier career opportunities with Boeing was it very difficult to penetrate the international market if you're not selling a quote product. It's harder to sell services. With offsets in country, international countries want obviously to take advantage, but they also want to advance their own economy.
Sure.
So it's tough to typically sell a product into an international country, and they rely on their local population for services.
Right.
If you're trying to sell services, it becomes much more of a conflict. So I think that productization and understanding your enterprise company capabilities and how far you can stretch and how upfront you can make the right process investments to adapt to a different business model is fundamental if you are actually going to try to take innovation on a different track from your business core.
Yeah. And I would think that maybe even requires a certain risk appetite to sort of say how far can you go from your core DNA. So back to, I think, what you said, it becomes a sort of a cultural, question too. Like, do you have that kind of culture to make some of those smaller or bigger pivots, I would think.
Correct. And your prior conversations around strategy and its linked to innovation, you cannot do it in a vacuum.
Right.
The company, organization needs to buy into the strategy and make the commitment. And I think strategy really just provides that communication framework of this is what we're focused on. This is where we're going to make investments. And as you align to the strategy, people can have confidence that the company will back you with resources to do those things. But to experiment outside of the strategic plan boundaries is to your point, is a higher risk scenario, and it's difficult to rally resources on a sustained basis to be able to get the outcome that you need. So you've got to link that advancement, that pursuit back to your strategy so that the organization knows where those guardrails are, how they can secure resources to advance that strategy, even if it is different than the legacy, organization had, which is good because it needs to evolve and needs to advance. So change is good, but it needs to be communicated and aligned and then resourced properly.
Absolutely. Wow, that's deep right there. All right. So the next one, and Prachi, you brought up culture. So we spend a lot of time in our podcast talking about the role of agility, adaptability, and trust to build this culture of innovation and to be able to have that appetite for change and risk and to be able to think through all those things you laid out, Tony, in terms of, if we're going to make this shift, what are the things in the organization that need to shift in order to be able to do that thing, whether it's a product, moving from services to product or vice versa. So thinking about the role of adoption in the context of this culture shift, in your leadership journey, what challenges have you seen in terms of adoption? What structures are key to making that adoption stick?
Well, we spent, particularly in the context of in the spin, there was a conscious effort strategy to align the new $4 billion SAIC as an enterprise operation. SAC had a great legacy, 10 billion, and my opinion, as a federation of smaller businesses that work together or not. But collectively as the enterprise was very successful, right? But we met some market conditions, some economic conditions and the like, that we felt it was appropriate to shift gears. And as a new company with a very strong legacy, we took the initiative to try and treat things as an enterprise and bring all the resources together under one umbrella. We realigned all the accounts accordingly so that there was one set of account managers and it wasn't geographic, and that facilitated our time to market significantly. We could team faster, we could prioritize opportunities in the market faster with one team looking at one account set. That was a huge aspect. And moving the technical resources into a matrix component broke down a lot of the vertical stovepipes and the isolation of resources that a company of our size had. As we had 12, 15,000 people, at the time of the spin. And there were pockets everywhere. I remember, as we took inventory of what we really had for past performance, in the past, perhaps we felt we had 100 engineers doing certain training simulation capabilities, and took an inventory, we probably actually had 500, but they were all in different markets and different components. And until we really looked at a cross section from accounts vertically to technical capability horizontally, it gave us a sense of we had more robust capabilities than we thought at scale. And scale was a critical component for us to pursue the larger contracts. And we reshaped our past performance perspective and orientation and communication to reflect a much larger enterprise, even though the company itself was half the size as a business. So I think those aspects of the challenges around that matrix were a sense of loss for some of the managers at the time of what they controlled. So there was a significant loss of control perspective or perception. Communication was key. I think we had some, again, early adopters of this organizational structure that were helpful. There were definitely naysayers, but we stuck to the strategy, communicated effectively, celebrated early successes where things actually did improve, where we could show value add of this approach. And the biggest, effort success was when the early naysayers became adopters.
Yes, that was
and champions on their own right. So. But it took probably 12 to 24 months to shift the enterprise orientation collectively. I mean, there were always pockets, but my sense was 2 years in, we had probably the maturity of an enterprise that had common goals, had a strategy that folks were aligned on, and we could make investment decisions by account or by technology in a much more robust way than we could before the spin.
Right.
That's awesome.
So Tony, I love how this has been an amazing conversation, and I love how we kind of went from discussing vision and strategy down to innovation, invention, tech transfer. We talked about the barriers. You described, some of the missed opportunities, and now we are in the, sort of tactical realm of discussing organizational structures. And I think what you just described has a lot of optimization baked into it, right?
Want to hear more? Make sure to listen to part 2 of this episode by staying connected, by subscribing and following us on all our socials at UAH, I2C, and Samaya Studios on LinkedIn. Bye, everyone.